from TIBCO Professional Services Group, and we basically go and implement the AJAX and SOA based solutions which TIBCO has to offer. And basically the agenda that we are looking at today is the Web 2.0 that has evolved so far. The current state of Web 2.0, what all technologies it encompasses, and what are the add-ons that are currently available in the Web 2.0 products, and the Web 2.0 enhancements, which is basically the future of Web 2.0, which are the different technologies which are maturing. Basically, the technology which we'll be touching here is the AJAX push technology, and TIBCO has one product called the AJAX message service, which is a Comet-based tool, and there is another. The direct web remoting technology is not a TIBCO-based; it's a third-party technology, so we can touch on that as well. It is also Comet-based, and there is something called as the TIBCO page bus, which is basically, how many of you are aware of the concept of an enterprise service bus or a message bus on the server side, like JMS? How many of you heard of JMS, the Java message service? Yeah, so it's basically the same thing but implemented in JavaScript to be executed in the browser in the context of a particular page. So we'll have a look at this technology as well. So we'll take a quick snapshot of exactly how Web 2.0 has come so far. So applications started with the dumb terminal, and in the case of dumb terminal, what used to happen was the terminal had no processing to do. All the processing was done on the server side, and it used to just send the data to the client, and the dumb terminal was used just to view the data. That transitioned to something called as the client server, and this gave birth to the concept of thick clients like Windows-based applications or Java, AWT or Swing-based applications, and they were thick clients, so a special installation was required on the client side, which meant there was additional overhead on the administrators to maintain these installations on the client side. So that gave way to something called as web-based applications. So the browser evolved, HTML evolved, JavaScript evolved, and that gave birth to the Web 1.0 technologies like JSP, servlets. So again, these applications were dumb terminals. These were as good as dumb terminals. They did nothing on the client side. All the processing was done by the JSP or the servlet on the server side, and dumb HTML was sent back to the client. And now again we are seeing a shift towards the client server thing. Not exactly client server, but Web 2.0, which means that the client is becoming more and more intelligent. It can do some amount of processing. It won't necessarily do business processing kind of processing, but it can render the data intelligently. So it can start handling some level of processing on the client side. So again, we see a shift in the technology. So what is Web 2.0? What all does it constitute of? Web 2.0 basically constitutes of AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript and XML, which basically means there is an XML HTTP request object embedded in the browser. There is the HTML components, the HTML, DOM, CSS, and there is JavaScript. These three combined form what we call as Web 2.0 today, or AJAX. So this is what used to happen before. The static HTML pages, the model view controller on the server side, view getting generated, passed to the web browser, and this gave way to this. The model and view stayed on the web server. They now create an XML send it to the client, the browser, and browser does some processing on its own and then updates the user interface depending on what needs and what doesn't need to be updated. So this is the shift. So what Web 2.0 has achieved is more intuitive web applications, because using the XML HTTP request, you can send asynchronous requests to the server side and refresh only part of the user interface. In case of Web 1.0, what used to happen was, before Gmail came into the picture, if you used Yahoo emails, you click on an email, the entire page gets refreshed. So that has given way to the Web 2.0 approach, like Gmail and even Yahoo now, or even MSN. Now everyone has followed that. But I think before we proceed, I need to clarify one thing about there was one point raised during the last lecture about cross-domain JavaScript AJAX applications accessing cross-domain web services. So what needs to happen in that case is, if you have an AJAX application which is trying to access cross-domain web services, then you need to write a proxy code on the same web server on which your AJAX application is residing. And that proxy code, either a JSP or a servlet, will then make those cross-domain calls. You can't make those cross-domain calls directly from the web browser. You make a call to the JSP, that makes the cross-domain calls and sends the response back to you. There is no configuration necessary in the browser. You can't do any configuration in the browser for cross-domain web service calls. You absolutely cannot do any web service calls cross-domain when you are deployed the application on the HTTP. When you are accessing an AJAX application from HTTP, you cannot make any cross-domain web service calls. If you are running it locally from the file system, you can make web service calls. So often it happens that during development, you are accessing it locally, everything works fine. Then one fine day you deploy it on the web server and everything stops working because cross-domain doesn't work. So the only way to fix that is write some kind of a proxy code using JSP or servlet. So this is what the Web 2.0 has achieved. Web 2.0 has brought web applications very close to the rich desktop-based applications. I think you must have heard this plenty of times throughout the day. So I'll just go ahead. If you have any questions, just ask them then and there itself. No need to wait for the end of the PPT. Let's just have the questions as and when you have them. So this is some of the Web 2.0 jargon, which I'm sure you must have already. Have you actually used any of these technologies? How many of us have used at least one or two of these technologies? Yeah, so almost everyone. Everyone familiar with XSS or what XSS stands for? How many of you know what is XSS? No, that's CSS. No, XSS is cross-site scripting. So it's a JavaScript vulnerability which some sites are potentially vulnerable to this kind of code. If you basically, what it means is, if you put some kind of let's say there's an input or a text area, and you're supposed to enter some description, and which gets posted to the browser, which gets saved into the database, and then it comes back to you and you see it on the view only page. So if you enter some script tag and put some malicious code in it, then you enter it, you post it to it goes to the server, and then it comes back, and then it does something malicious on your machine, then that is cross-site scripting. So mostly all the AJAX frameworks have fixes for cross-site scripting. All the leading Web 2.0 frameworks have support to disallow such kind of JavaScript code. So what they do is they just display the JavaScript code as it is using escaping, and there are lots of techniques which are available to fix, because there are lots of permutation and combinations in which developers can exploit this loophole. How many of you have used the add-ons like Firebug or DOM Inspector? So these are some of the good developer add-ons which are available, which can be used while developing AJAX applications. So basically what it does is it allows you to see the HTML content, how exactly because typically in AJAX you don't see the actual code that is getting generated. As in case of JSP or servlet, you can easily see the code that is getting generated. You do a system.out and you can see what is getting passed from the server to the client. But in this case, it becomes a bit difficult because they have proprietary methods and there's encapsulation of different APIs. So these kind of tools come in very handy when working with AJAX. So you can go to the Mozilla add-ons page and you'll find a lot of good developer add-ons which you can use while development.
What was the previous editor?
That was not an editor, it's an AJAX application.
Yeah, so here we went to.
Oh, that's the plugin. So in tools you have the DOM Inspector, and that's the Mozilla plugin which shows you the HTML, how it has been generated by the AJAX tool. You can see the head, title, text. This is HTML code. Now, we'll touch upon some of the value-added features which almost all the popular AJAX frameworks use or provide to the developer. Which AJAX frameworks have you worked with? The Dojo Toolkit or Silverlight or TIBCO General Interface? Which AJAX? Anyone use any AJAX frameworks? Dojo. Anyone with TIBCO General Interface? No.
What is a big mainstream? I work on the
Okay. Okay. So with respect to the TIBCO General Interface is basically a TIBCO AJAX framework, and what it provides you is a set of object-oriented JavaScript classes, or basically a set of JS files which have encapsulated the JavaScript code in the form of classes. So it provides you an object-oriented foundation. As what you can see is they have packages here: jsx3.net.form.request.service and so on. So you use the jsx3.net.service object to make web service calls. You make the request object to make HTTP GET or POST requests to the server, so on and so forth. And these classes have the variables and the methods defined. So what TIBCO has basically done is has object-oriented the JS files. And you can also derive one class from the other. And you inherit all those methods and properties which you have defined in the parent class in your derived class. This was one example of the add or the feature which you get along with TIBCO GI. Next, there is a concept of a data cache, which can be better explained with this. So, when you develop a plain HTML application, let's say you have two tables, and both the tables have the same data. They are displaying the same data. So, if you have to display it in HTML, what you will do is start the table tag, tr tag, td tag, and embed all the data within those tags. So basically on the same page, you are replicating the data twice in both the tables. So in TIBCO GI, what you have to do is very similar to what the previous presentation said basically. You have a cache, and you can store your data in the cache, and you can just reference this cache object or this CDF object in your presentation layer. So you have basically separated the presentation from the data, and so the same copy of the data is used by both these controls. And any change in this data causes a refresh of data in the presentation layer. You don't have to do anything special for that. This is one of the good features of TIBCO GI. Then, as I said, it provides you the communications libraries like the service, request, and form. You can use the form to submit a HTML form to the server side using HTTP post. Then there are data binders. So what you can do is when you are making a web service call, or when you are basically working with SOAP web services, what you basically do is send an XML to the server and get an XML back. This is what basically happens when you're making a SOAP web service call. So TIBCO GI gives you a tool wherein you have the user interface in front of you. So you can say that in the XML that is going to the server, I want the data from this text box, I want the data from this grid to go as an input to the web service call. And in the output, you can map the same XML or the different XML which has come back to a different set of UI elements. So basically, in a typical scenario, what happens is, let's say you have your email editor. On the top frame, you see the emails, and when you click on your email, you see the email details below. So what you can do is you can map for this you want to make a web service call, so you can give the email ID or whatever, the ID of that particular email in the input of the web service call, and when you get back the response, you can map the response XML to the UI elements in the frame below. So you don't have to explicitly write any JavaScript code for that. The tool will do everything for you. It will generate the code, and you just have to call that code on click of a row in the upper grid. So it provides you all these features. Then there's logging and debugging, and there are events on controls, like if someone clicks on a row, if someone double clicks on a row, and so on. There are lots of events defined, and there are more than 100 plus GUI components available out of the box. When you install TIBCO GI, you get 100 plus GUI components. The best example that I give is you have the standard select box in HTML. So what the additional feature that they have given is a combo control, which is a combination of text box plus select. So you can start typing something. If it's already there in the select box, it will show you a filtered list, and you can select one of them, or you can type something which is totally absent from the select box, and you get these controls out of the box. You don't have to pay anything extra or do anything special for this. You get this as soon as you install TIBCO GI. So besides the XHR is basically a XML HTTP request. So apart from the XML HTTP request, these are the additional features which you get in most of the AJAX framework, not just with TIBCO GI. You would get almost all of these with the other tools as well, like Silverlight or Flex and so on. This was the concept of data cache. And this is the IDE. This is the integrated development environment which GI gives you. You can see your files over here, your UI files, JS files, your mapping files, your WSDL files. Everyone knows what's a WSDL? Yes? Yeah, when you're making a web service call, it's the web service definition language. So that is what defines what kind of an input the web service takes, what kind of an output the web service will give you. All that is defined in the WSDL file. So all those files will be visible here. These are the components which are available to you. You can expand the tree and your grids, lists, form elements, containers like dialogues, your blocks, trees, etc. So you can just drag and drop things over here. You can move them around, you can align them either relative or absolute, and you can create your user interface. So you can, this speeds up your development time. You can develop a lot of controls pretty fast using these tools. And so this is where the TIBCO GI is available. It is available open source under a BSD license. So it is also available as an enterprise version wherein you have to buy it. If you buy it, you get support. If you don't buy it, you can still go to the forums and register. It has a very active forum group and a lot of posts coming in every day. I'm also active on that forum. So even if you go for the open source version, you can still go to the forums, post your queries, and they'll get answered usually. It also won the Best of Open Source Awards in last year in the category of Best AJAX Toolkit. So it's got quite a good name in the industry as an AJAX toolkit. So this was basically the Web 2.0, what has been done so far. So this is what you have available as of till this point. And now what we are going to look at is what are the new developments that are happening in Web 2.0, and what are the new features that are going to be available. Again, the Web 2.0 and the new features that are coming on are still maturing. So they're maturing pretty fast. So they're already at a stage where they can be used they're already being used in production systems. So it's a good thing to start using them if you aren't already. So the shift that has basically happened is there in the Web 1.0 applications, wherein you had a JSP which generated the front end. Then you entered some data in the JSP or the HTML which was generated by the JSP, and you posted your HTML form to the server which resided on the application server. Then that did some processing, accessed the database, and send the response back to you. This was the typical Web 1.0 architecture on the server side. This was also called as a 3-tier architecture or N-tier architecture or whatever. So that is getting obsolete now, and the industry is moving towards SOA-based architectures. SOA basically stands for service-oriented architecture. So whatever applications you have, they expose services on the enterprise service bus. This is called as the enterprise service bus. Basically a publish-subscribe model. This was the request-reply model, and the architecture which is now coming in is the publish-subscribe model. And with this change happening, Web 1.0 has also given way to the Web 2.0 applications. And the rich internet applications can make these web service calls on the various applications that are available on the server side. So what this change is driving is people are now moving towards more real-time systems. They want real-time updates to be generated and pushed to the client side. They don't want the user to see stale data. So the SOA shift is basically pushing Web 2.0 towards the AJAX push kind of technology. So this is how anyone knows what they are doing? Is it the picture of a civil war? Is it a circus, or what is it? Pretty close, yeah. It's a stock market. So they are trading in the 1800s. That is how trading used to happen. And the technology has evolved now to such an extent that this is how trading happens now. This is the production, this is what is there in production of the Doha Stock Exchange. This is implemented using SOA on the server side, and the TIBCO AMS or the AJAX message service on which is used to push real-time data onto TIBCO general interface. Or it might even be a simple HTML screen, whatever the case may be. So this is how real-time business is happening now. So the products that we are looking at today would basically be the TIBCO AJAX message service, AMS. This is again Comet based. So those of you who have already attended the Lightstreamer presentation, there would be a few slides which would be common in both, because both are based on the Comet framework. And again, there's DWR, which is direct web remoting, which is a little different from AMS or Comet, but it involves Comet. So we are going to look at these two products / technologies, whatever we would like to call them. So this is the change that has happened from HTML pages to AJAX pages to AJAX RIAs with asynchronous or with asynchronous HTTP or HTTP push with SOA on the backend. This is where the world is moving towards. So what is the technology used for data push? One is non-AJAX based, which is one option. That is ActiveX based or applets based or plugin based. Flash plugin can be used. But of course it has its own limitations. There is no standard protocol. So if you have firewalls, then it won't work through firewalls, especially in case of applets and then there's the option of AJAX using HTTP polling or streaming, which is a much cleaner approach. It is a zero install approach. You don't have to install anything on the client side. And depending on what kind of HTTP push strategy you adopt, you might have to install something on the server side, or you might not have to install something on the server side. We'll have a look at those approaches in the following slides. And since everything is working on the HTTP on the HTTP port, there is no problem with firewalls. And security model, again in the last presentation there was some, I thought there was some confusion about the security model. What happens in typical AJAX applications is when the user comes to the initial screen, he is given a username password box. He enters something, it's sent to the server side, and the authentication happens. And what the authentication servlet or JSP or whatever that piece of code is, it does is it sets a cookie in the response, and that cookie comes to the client side. And that cookie gets sent every time the subsequent requests are made to the server. And so the server gets the session ID, and it can do the authentication using that session ID to see whether the user is authenticated or not. If it is not authenticated, he's again redirected back to the login screen. That is the way security is implemented in AJAX applications. The disadvantage of AJAX being that there is a trade-off between performance, about what amount of data can you actually handle on the client side. I've seen projects where the client says, I have 1 million records coming from the database, and I want to populate a list box with that. And that is not feasible in Web 2.0. It is not even feasible in Web 1.0, or possibly it is not even feasible in a thick client. Even if you develop a thick client and ask it to populate a list box with 1 million records, it won't be able to do it. It will still crash, or it will take a lot of time. So a lot depends on how you design the AJAX application. If you don't design the AJAX application well, then it's bound to mess things up. So designing the AJAX application is a very important task, and you can learn it only by making mistakes. So that is the only downside, but I guess that downside applies to any technology. So these are the 4 models which are used for the real-time updates. One is the page refresh, which basically means that user physically presses F5 or presses some kind of a button to refresh the user interface. That is one option. There's polling, there's long poll, and there is HTTP streaming. So HTTP streaming basically requires some installation on the server side, because we'll go through those slides. So you must have seen these slides in the light streamer, because they're based on the Comet thing. This is the page refresh. He sends the request, and the whole thing comes there. Very simple. Then there is a periodic polling that can be done by the AJAX layer. So in AJAX, in your AJAX code, you can set an interval saying every 5 minutes send a refresh. So every 5 minutes it will send a request, and it will get the updated data. This is another solution, which is not really real time. You can't use this for real time applications like the stock market that you saw. This approach can definitely not be used for those kind of applications. Then there is the asynchronous polling, which with the polling being controlled by the server. So basically what happens is, it's again asynchronous requests being sent by the AJAX layer. But what the server does is, it holds on to that request. It doesn't send, if it doesn't have any update, then it doesn't send anything back. It waits for a little longer, depending on what is the timeout of this particular request reply which is set for HTTP. And until that time it waits, if it doesn't, if it's still, if the timeout has reached and still it doesn't have any data to send, it will send back the blank data. Or if it gets anything in between, it will send it back. So this is another approach with the polling frequency, which is controlled by the server side, not by the AJAX code, which was the case in the second model. And then there's the streaming AJAX, which is fully asynchronous, but this basically uses some features of HTTP 1.1. It basically sends multiple requests and replies on the same HTTP connection. So the existing application servers not having implemented that, what Lightstreamer or such kind of comment engines have done is they have re-implemented that the HTTP 1.1 protocol, and they have implemented this in parallel to the application server, which you might already have. So that is why you need a separate install of the Comet server. Is this clear? Any questions? So this slide basically summarizes the 4 approaches. As the technology is still maturing, there are different people giving different names to different approaches, and nothing is, there's no standardization as such. So, but largely, this is what people have been, this is what is largely accepted. So this is what basically happens in the Comet architecture. You have your own web server, which doesn't support HTTP 1.1, and you have the Lightstreamer server or the Comet server, which supports HTTP 1.1 and is capable of pushing real-time data to your AJAX client. So exactly what is, how is AMS different from any other applications? It comes as a separate install, and so what they have done is that they have implemented the connection pooling and the packet optimization on the server side in such a way that they can support the use Java NIO, so that they can keep the request open long enough to support real-time data transfer. Then it also does TCP/IP optimization. So it has control over creation of the packets which are transmitted back, and that basically gives it the advantage of writing exactly or sending back a request exactly when it wants to. It can keep the socket open or the connection open and send back the data whenever it wants. It implements true HTTP streaming. There is no polling here. The client doesn't have to poll at a regular frequency like 1 second, 2 seconds. It's true HTTP streaming. And it supports filtering, selecting, multiplexing, sending multiple messages over a single channel, and so on. There are different service types which it supports. It can merge the data, it can send distinct data. It supports commands for sending specific data sets, or it can even send raw data, depending on what you're requesting. Security, it prevents cross-site scripting. It has the necessary fixes in place to disable the cross-site scripting if anyone tries to do any. It prevents XSS code from getting executed. It escapes and unescapes. It's web compatible. It is plain HTTP, HTML, JavaScript, page bus, no applets, no ActiveX. There are no. All the communication happens over plain HTTP. So it doesn't matter who the client is, even if it is Java. It works with thick clients as well. It's not necessary that it has to be an AJAX application which has initiated the communication. And it's highly scalable. It supports a large number of users per CPU. And it supports publish, subscribe. TIBCO page bus is something which is basically an enterprise service bus designed for JavaScript. And to give you an example, this is a particular website. So what happens is when you click on this map, what it does is it takes the latitude and longitude which Google Maps gives it, and it publishes that latitude and longitude on the page bus. Now what these controls are doing is they have subscribed to that event, the publish event. So whenever this guy publishes the latitude and longitude, these guys get those messages in parallel and they start their own processing independently. This guy takes the latitude and longitude, resolves it into a country name, and gets its own country data, the name of the city, name of the country, name of the capital, flag. This guy goes and gets the currency information on its own in parallel, and this guy goes and gets the weather information in parallel. So these three have subscribed to that event, and this is the guy who is publishing on that event. So this is basically the publish subscribe method. So what this does is this creates a loose coupling between these three components. If you are doing API calls, that's a tight coupling. If you add a third component there, a fourth component there, you again have to make an API call so that to support that. But with the publish subscribe model, even if you add a fourth component, all you have to do is subscribe. Call the subscribe API so that also gets the latitude and longitude, and it can go and get whatever data it wants. So this basically creates a loose coupling between components. This is especially helpful if you are creating mashups, and it comes in the form of a JS file. So you can embed it in any HTML application or any other AJAX framework or any mashup framework which you plan to use. So basically it comes in the form of a server. And once it is started, you can go to the. So it can be either used with TIBCO GI, or it can be used with plain HTML, or it can be used with any other AJAX toolkit like Flex or whatever. And if you enable the monitor, you can see what data is being pushed by the AMS server. So this is the data which is getting pushed by the AMS server. And once this is what GI is doing is, once this comes in, it gets published on the page bus. And this matrix is called as a matrix or a grid. This has subscribed to that particular event on the page bus, and it gets updated on the matrix. So this is using the This is using real-time HTTP or AJAX streaming. No polling involved here. It can also, supposing the network connection is weak, if the bandwidth is not much, what it can do is it can fall over on a polling model as well. So as long as the streaming model is available, it uses the streaming model. Whenever the bandwidth becomes low and it cannot use the streaming model, it falls back on either AJAX polling or page refresh, or it can scale back as well, depending on what kind of a connection you have. Then there is something called as the DWR. You can get more details on this website, getahead.org. TIBCO is currently sponsoring the development of this technology for DWR. What it allows you to do is, it allows you to, if you have a set of Java classes on the server side, it allows you to publish those Java classes as JavaScript functions in your JavaScript code. So you call this AJAX service.getOptions, which is exposed. So this AJAX service class is basically exposed as a JavaScript in your JavaScript code. And you call this method, it basically sends a request to the server, it evaluates the content, and the data comes back to the server, to the client. So if you have predefined Java classes which you intend to use in your AJAX applications, you can use DWR to do that. What it can also do is, it can, if you have 3-4 instances open, and it keeps, whenever a client comes up, it registers itself with the class, and whenever there is a change in this value, it will get published to all the clients which have subscribed on a real-time basis. So the models for real-time updates for DWR are 3. There is polling, there is long polling, or there is piggyback. So polling is again on a fixed interval basis. Long polling is the same as point number 3 previously. That is, the AJAX client makes a call to the server side. It keeps the connection open for a specified duration of time. Basically, I think, which is dictated by the HTTP keep alive, whatever value you set for the HTTP keep alive. And if it has anything, it sends back. If it doesn't have anything, it sends back a blank data. That is long polling. And there is piggyback. Piggyback is basically, whenever the server gets an update, it sees if it has a valid active connection on which it can send the data. If it has, it sends it back. If it doesn't have, then it waits for the client to make a request. Whenever it makes a request, it sends it back. So it collects all the data and then sends it back. That's called the piggyback approach. There is the DWR demo is also pretty much similar. And DWR basically comes in form of a WAR file which you can deploy in any application server. In this case, it's deployed on Apache Tomcat, and it seems to be giving some kind of a error, bind exception. Anyways. And this is the publish subscribe which is achieved using page bus. So this enterprise service bus which you see on the server side is the SOA part, and the real-time data gets transmitted to every client. In every client, there is a page bus residing on which it gets published, and the controls which are there on the client, they have subscribed to these events and they get the data in real time. So this is what page bus is all about. Page bus is basically an open source technology. TIBCO has developed it. TIBCO developed page bus, and there is something called as the Open AJAX Alliance. You must have heard it in some other talks as well. Lightstreamer is also involved in the Open AJAX Alliance. So TIBCO has basically developed page bus, and they have contributed page bus to the Open AJAX Alliance hub. So it's available for download under the open source license. We saw the demo of that, of the page bus in it's contacting maps.google.com. It's even though I'm running it from the local host, in order to get the maps, it has to query the maps, the Google Maps, and anyways it won't work because it has it is working. No, it won't work. There's some problem with the port 9999. So this was the page bus demo. So these are the resources that are available. TIBCO AJAX message service, or AMS, which is available there. The direct web remoting is available. TIBCO page bus is available open source, and TIBCO general interface, which is one of the industry appreciated AJAX frameworks, also available under open source, is available at these locations. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, and we are open to questions. No? Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice time with AJAX.